This is my presentation. It's entitled On the Existential Road from Regret to Heroism, Searching for Meaning in Life. I'm a senior lecturer here in psychology, and I'll tell you a little bit about my research and some statistical analysis that I used. What has been the biggest regret in your life so far? Now, you're not here and you can't tell me. That's not important. But think about it. What has been the biggest regret in your life so far? And now hold that thought. So, we've done some research on heroism and heroes. Heroes represent struggles for values and principles via self-sacrificing behavior for the greater good, and they're selfless. That's typical. Heroes serve particular functions. What we found is we can cluster them in 3 functions: protection, enhancement, and moral guidance. Please keep in mind enhancement. We'll get back to that later. So heroes have psychological consequences, influences. They have an influence on the perception of meaning in life. We've demonstrated this. They impact on the search for meaning in life, for example. Heroes and heroism serve as sources of meaning in life. So the central assumption here, now, for this talk, is the following. Searching for meaning in life increases the motivation to engage in heroic actions. So let me tell you a little bit about research on meaning and challenges, notions from existential psychology. Why do people search for meaning in life? Now, this question is one that already philosophers dealt with. It has been picked up by psychology and has now developed into quite considerable and respectable research domain within psychology. So the central assumption is that for human beings, meaning systems matter. Human beings are very much guided by their interpretations about the world and their belief systems, not so much by their instincts, like animals, other animals in comparison. So meaning systems are essential. And various events and experiences are associated with challenges to these meaning systems. For example, mortality salience. When we think about our death, then that does something to us. What will happen? We're gone. We don't want to be gone. We want to live on forever. How do we do this? We can do this in different ways. We can have a lot of children. We'll live on that way. We can write books, papers, win the Nobel Prize. We'll live on culturally. This is one way how to deal with mortality salience. There are other threats also, like uncertainty, boredom. We've done a lot of research on boredom and disillusionment. So, crucial is that people have the motivation to make meaning of their life, and they search for meaning in life. That is essential, an essential feature for human beings. And they do that in response to the threats that I listed. There are also other threats. I just gave some examples. Meaning search is negatively associated with presence of meaning in life. So the lower the presence of meaning in life, the more people want to search for meaning in life, to kind of fill this void or increase the level of their perceived meaning in life. So meaning search follows challenges to the meaning systems. And the focus here today is on regret as a challenge to our meaning system. Here's an example for regret experiences. Here are some quotes. One from Queen Latifah. I made decisions that I regret. I took them as learning experiences. I'm human, not perfect, like anybody else. And then another quote from an intellectual, Sylvester Stallone. I have tons of regret, but I think that's one of the reasons that push people to create things. Out of their angst, their regret, comes the best from artists, painters, and writers. Here now an academic definition of regret. Regret is a negative emotion predicted on an upward, self-focused, counterfactual inference. Consequences of regret are blame, superstition, suspicion, change of expectancies and behavior. In that lies an opportunity for corrective actions and improvements. We come from an existential perspective. Regret is an affective response to meaning threats. As Luca phrased it, painful bleeding of existential anxiety and existential guilt. It's associated with a search. The central assumption for us is it's associated with a search for meaning in life. So we conducted several studies to examine the link between regret, a search for meaning in life, and heroism motivation. The motivation to be special and to improve. So here's study 1A. The question was, are higher levels of trait regret associated with higher levels of search for meaning in life? Very simple. It was a correlational design with 52 participants, 32 males, 20 females. And we gave participants particular scales to fill in. One was the regret scale. It has 5 items. Here are examples. When I think about how I'm doing in life, I often assess opportunities I have passed up. And we gave people items of a happiness scale and a search for meaning in life scale. It's part of the search for the meaning in life questionnaire. Here are the results. There was a correlation between regret and search for meaning in life. And it was irrespective of happiness. That was replicated in another study. The correlation was 0.40. Conclusion is, trait regret is associated with search for meaning in life. So individual differences in regret associated with search for meaning in life. Those who regret more tend to search more for meaning in life. We conducted another study with a similar design. We just added one component to it, namely action and inaction regret. In the literature on regret, this has often been distinguished. So we needed to show that this regret effect also holds for both forms of regret, action regret and inaction regret. So in this study, again, we measured this general trait regret with the regret scale, and we developed 4 items for action regret and inaction regret. For example, how prone are you to feeling regret about an action, how often do you feel regret about an inaction, and so on and so on. So the hypothesis was that there's also a positive association here for regret and search for meaning in life, irrespective of whether that relates to general regret, action regret, or inaction regret. And that's exactly what we found. Well, of course, these items were intercorrelated. You would assume that they're similar. Well, the conclusion is that individual differences in regret, whether general regret, action regret, or inaction regret, are positively associated with search for meaning in life. Those who tend to regret more search more for meaning in life. So what, you may ask? Well, we argue that search for meaning in life transfers over to heroism motivation. Is that so? We tested that. So we conducted a study with 111 participants. Administered again the regret scale, search for meaning in life scale, plus 2 items. I'm always looking to do things that are meaningful, for example. And some mood items to control for mood. And the heroism motivation scale, which has 4 items. These 4 items express the necessity to act and the need, or the wish to be perceived as a hero. These are the 4 items. I want to behave heroically towards others if it is necessary and I have the opportunity to do so. It's important to me to be seen as someone who can act heroically. I strive to be a hero for other people if the situation requires, there's an S missing, someone to step up. It is significant to my life to be seen as someone who has the qualities of a hero. So, we analyzed the results, and what we found is that there was a correlation between regret and search for meaning in life was significant. Regret also correlated with heroism motivation. So the motivation to act heroically, an extreme form of prosocial behavior. So then we tested for mediation. Would the effect of regret on heroism motivation be explained by search for meaning in life? And it was. Here you see the results. Regret predicted search for meaning in life, which was correlated with heroism motivation. So it did predict also then heroism motivation. Now, this is a mediation analysis, and I want to tell you a bit more about how these analyses are conducted. The common procedure nowadays was delivered by Hayes a few years ago. Here is, I listed the second edition of his book, came out last year, Introduction to Mediation, Moderation in Conditional Process Analysis, a Regression-Based Approach by Guilford Press. I included here a link to the website. You can have a look at this website. It leads you also to another link where you can order the book if you want to. So the model he uses is called process, and this is version 3 at this stage, version 3. Now, when you look at the right side of the slide, what you see is this mediation model. It's model 4 of this program, process 3. And this is how this works. In the link that I provided there under process 3, you can get to the website from which you can download the program. This is a syntax file that you use in SPSS. What you do is you open this file with SPSS, so first download it, then open it, then hit Control A. Everything will be activated, and then you need to hit the green arrow at the top. Then this program runs. It's a macro. That means your SPSS then uses this program, process 3. Okay. Then you go to another syntax file, or you open a new one, doesn't matter, and you put in a particular syntax with which you can run the program. There are also other ways of using this program via the menu, but I usually use syntax. And you can see it here on the slide below. So you write the syntax into the syntax file, highlight it, and again hit that green arrow. And then the program runs. It's very simple. It's really a standard procedure nowadays. And this is a standard model, a mediational model. I can highly recommend it. Now there are many, many models that you can test with process. This is just one. This is model 4. This tests our hypothesis for this study 2. Right? Okay. Now I should say that on the right side of the slide here, you see this picture. This is actually from an earlier version of the book, just that you're not confused. That hasn't changed. The versions of Model 4 hasn't changed from the earlier version to the version nowadays. Okay, so then we went on and asked ourselves, well, so now we demonstrated all of this for trait regret. How about state regret? Would this process also kick in when people feel regret in the moment? So to test this, we chose an experimental design. We manipulated regret experiences. And we also asked ourselves, well, what's the role of self-enhancement? Remember, enhancement is an important function of heroes and heroism. So, what is self-enhancement then? It's seeing oneself in a positive light. No? We used here 2 subdimensions of a self-enhancement scale developed by Hepper and colleagues, namely favorable construals and self-affirming reflections. I'll give you some examples a bit later. So we had these 2 conditions. Half of the participants wrote a story about the biggest regret in their lives, and the other half wrote a story about a normal life. Then we measured whether people felt regret. They also worked on a filler task, and we administered the Search for Meaning in Life questionnaire to measure search for meaning in life. After that, we measured self-enhancement and heroism motivation. So here are the items, in case you wondered. Here are the items of the self-enhancement questionnaire. The 2 subscales, favorable construals and self-affirming reflections. So for example, for favorable construals, there's looking back, I believe that I have been changing, growing, and improving as a person. For self-affirmation, I remember that I can overcome hardships and be really successful. Or, I'm aware of my values and what matters to me. All right. So, what we found was the following. The regret manipulation was successful. People had higher regrets in the regret condition than in the control condition. Regret also predicted search for meaning in life, so with higher levels of regret, people experienced greater search for meaning in life. And regret predicted heroism motivation. For higher level of regrets, people were more willing to act heroically. Search for meaning in life and heroism motivation was correlated. So the question was, what's going on? Could we replicate the mediation model that we tested in study 2 for trait regret? And what's the role of self-enhancement? This is what we did. We tested again for mediation. So regret would predict heroism motivation via search for meaning in life. And we used self-enhancement as a moderator. And the idea was this, that regret would predict heroism motivation, but only for people high in self-enhancement, not for people, or to a lesser degree for people, low in self-enhancement. This is important. Regret is a negative experience, and it's a challenge. And the idea is that people with high levels of self-enhancement, they can deal with this challenge. They turn this around into something very positive, a positive engagement with the world, namely heroism motivation. Importantly, search for meaning in life and self-enhancement were, in this model, unrelated to each other. So what you see here is that there are two paths from regret to heroism motivation. One is this existential path via search for meaning in life, and the other one is linked to self-enhancement. In Hayes, this program process theory, this is model 5, as you can see here on the right side of the slide. So again, here you find this in the book. You can download the macro. You don't need to buy the book to download the macro, all right? And then you can run this yourself. If you have enough variables available and you predict effects like this, where you have a mediational effect and a moderation effect that are unrelated to each other, then you can use model 5. Now, process 3 includes a lot of models. This is just one of them. It combines mediation and moderation, but independently from each other. So, study 3 demonstrated that regret increases search for meaning in life. It increased heroism motivation, and the regret effects on heroism motivation were mediated by search for meaning in life. Now, self-enhancement also affected heroism motivation, and the regret effect on heroism motivation was moderated by search for meaning in life, independently of the mediational effect of search for meaning in life. So we can say here now that heroism motivation depends on regret, search for meaning in life, and self-enhancement. That brings me to the general discussion. So the motivation to act heroically is affected here by regret in 2 ways. One was that these existential processes that are triggered by regret, namely the process of searching for meaning in life. We showed this in several studies. In conjunction, self-enhancement strategies matter. They moderate the effect of regret. What this shows is that regret is personally and interpersonally functional. It's personally functional because it triggers a search for meaning in life process which can change our interpretations of the world. It can change our life. And regret is interpersonally functional, as we could see with heroism motivation. Heroism motivation is a pro-social, extreme pro-social motivation. So the intention to help others, but in an extreme way. So therefore, regret transfers, as an individual experience, transfers to become interpersonally functional. And with regard to our own approach, this is very important. Regret qualifies as an existential emotion, and that has not been demonstrated before. That's new. The results are consistent with the notions that regret trigger improvement and corrective actions. They're consistent with our own approach on the importance of existential processes when people experience, for example, also other events that lead to boredom, disillusionment, all of this. Regret is similar. And heroism is a source of meaning in life. The future research should look more into different forms of regret, felt regret, anticipated regret. Also, what should be examined more, we haven't done this yet, is that the heroism motivation transfers over to actual behavior, heroic action. All right, so maybe you have questions or comments. Then you can email me. Or if you just have questions, you want to read more about this. This paper has been published a few weeks ago. The link is up there on the slide. Thank you very much.